Do it, document it, and then delegate it. Those 6 words are probably the best business advice you could give to any small to mid-sized business owner as they're looking to scale. And my guest today, the founder and CEO of Trainual. Trainual is a software platform that's a learning management system and documentation platform that we use in my businesses. So you'll hear me gushing about his software because I think it's outstanding. We've tried so many others that have not served us well until we found Trainual. And so I talk about that. So this is not a paid promotion for his product. You may see paid promotion on the top of this if you're watching YouTube. That's because there'll be a Rockbox Fitness and a Beam Light Sauna ad later. This is just me talking to Chris, getting to know him and understand how he has scaled his business so effectively. You're going to learn a lot from Chris, and he's a great dude. So enjoy this one and take some notes. Chris is the founder and CEO of Trainual. He has been helping small and mid-sized businesses grow and organize their processes, their roles, and their responsibilities. For over 8 years, he's been doing this. He is passionate about creating online training manuals that are consistent, teachable, and centralized in one place that enables entrepreneurs to scale their operations with ease and efficiency. Chris's background as an entrepreneur, consultant, and speaker has given him the opportunity to travel the world, meet amazing people, and learn from diverse perspectives so that he and his own inspiration grows with each one of those interactions. Chris is the author of The Business Playbook, a guide for designing the perfect business. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding it up right here. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, it's available on Amazon and it's outstanding. And we'll talk about it. He's also the host of the Organized Chaos podcast, where he shares his insights and tips on process and productivity and just being more efficient in your business. Chris, welcome to the ThriveMore show.
Thanks, Roger. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So, to all the listeners, true story. One of the women that I work with that helps me put together this podcast was just at Chris's event last week. This podcast will be coming out, in a few weeks or so. But she was just there. We use Trainual in our businesses with Rockbox Fitness and others. We use Trainual as our LMS system, our learning management system. So. When I speak as a fanboy to Chris about his software, it's genuine and authentic because my team loves it and our franchisees love it. So, Chris, can you take just a second? Because I want to talk about your serial entrepreneur background, but maybe just take a second to explain what Trainual is and as importantly, why it's different and better.
Yeah, sure. So Trainual is a software for organizing all of the knowledge in your business. So all your systems and processes, your SOPs, your onboarding materials, who's who and who does what and how inside your business. And so our whole thing is about getting your new people up to speed and keeping your existing team up to date. So they always have the best practices and the knowledge at their fingertips. So as I was growing up, you'd always hear, invest in an operations manual, a training manual. And it was crazy to me that everyone was making 3-ring binders and Dropbox folders and Word docs. And I thought there should be a system that's designed for this. And so Trainual is really simple to just fill out roles and responsibilities, processes, flow charts, all the key information in your business.
Yeah. And as I was sharing right before we went online here, or we went live, we use it as our learning management system to help franchisees that are in training. And as they bring new employees on, and there's employee churn, all of that is at their fingertips. We control it from the home office here to make sure that the data is always updated and it's the most recent information. But it's a great platform when you're nationwide, or I'm sure even worldwide, to still keep that centralized control and approach.
Absolutely. And franchises know this better than anyone, but to scale a franchise, to have multi-units, multi-locations, you have to make sure there's consistency across how you do what you do. And so franchises by law, I think, are required to have a franchise manual, and other businesses can learn from that. If you want to scale, you need to be consistent.
Yeah, exactly. When you go to Chick-fil-A, you want the sandwich and the fries to be exactly the same there as they would 1,000 miles away, right? And that's kind of the nature of franchising. Make it absolutely consistent. Well, when I was reading your book, and you tell it in great story format, you have a history of being a serial entrepreneur and starting at a pretty young age. So can you just talk about the video business just a little bit, because it was intriguing?
Yeah, sure. So when I was 14, I was going into high school. I thought I wanted to be a sportscaster. And so I'm walking around my field house at my school and looking at the clubs I could join. And there was a video production department. And so I joined in and I got trained on the cameras. And it just so happened that there was a spot available to be the co-host of this like student run TV show. And so I spent my first couple years in front of the camera. But because I was certified to use the camera, and people started seeing our show around town, they started asking, well, can you film my grandpa's birthday or my cousin's wedding or my son's, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah? And so we started making money and created this little business. And over time, throughout high school, the business grew. I was hiring all my friends. I ended up buying out a business partner. I went to college and held on to the business and ended up having this company for 12 years. We did events across all 50 states. We had 3 offices across the country. We had over 300 camera operators. And so what started just kind of in my basement at home turned into a real business.
I love that because literally you started that business at 14 and grew
Yeah.
it for 8 years. Like I love that. I love that. But the story, and I don't want to give away the book, but the story is your biggest pain point really was I don't want to say it was the birthing moment, but it probably led to Trainual, right? Your biggest pain point in that business. Just talk to listeners through what happened and how you had that epiphany.
Yeah, 100%. So, in a business where you start off as that technician, the one doing the work, the one doing the service, I was behind the camera and then I was editing the videos until midnight. And then I was waking up at that age in high school every 2 hours to switch out VHS tapes and my duplications, that I was
That's
making.
awesome. That
And
is
when you
awesome.
start by doing all of that work, you can only scale so far. And so at some point, you have to hire someone else to do the work. And so at first, I was hiring my younger brother and saying, I'll pay him $5 an hour to wake up through the night. Or then I was hiring my friends from school and saying, can you sit at the table? And then I was hiring other kids from the film department and saying, can you stand at the camera? When I went to college, it was really obvious because I needed to get work done while I was in class. And so
Yeah.
it's funny, this is going back a long time, but I went to school just outside of Boston and I would take the train into Boston and interview kids that were at the different film schools. And I would talk to them about, okay, who can do animations and who has a camera and who's a good photographer and who's a good editor. And I would put together this binder of who could do what in the business. And then when I got a job, I would farm out these jobs to, okay, this person's going to edit, this person's going to do this. But I realized that the leverage of having other people do what I did is how that business scaled. I
Mm.
couldn't do it all by myself. And that was something I discovered at a pretty young age.
If you start us back at the beginning of Trainual, right? So you have this video company. Again, I don't want to give it away. There's this a pivotal moment where you realize, oh my gosh, we didn't just do the most simple thing to train somebody. Because we
Yeah.
were so close to the business, which
Yeah.
we all are. All entrepreneurs, we're so close to our business, we can't see it. We can't see the forest for the trees. But if you could take us back to, because if I understand, there was the video business, then
Yeah.
it was kind of consulting on, hey, I can help you clean it up. And then you realized I need to go the SaaS route. I can help a lot more people. And when did that happen? Like, how did that transition into, I'm going to create a SaaS model that's going to be a superior product?
So looking back, it's always easier to connect the dots. But at the time, I didn't know I was going to end up in software. I had my video production company that, as I mentioned, I was scaling across the US. I had an office in Boston. I had an office in California, a third office in Ohio, and we were doing events across the country. And as that business grew, we hired people for different roles. And so one of the key hires that we made was an event coordinator that planned all of the events as they would approach. And she would do the pre-production checklist. She would crew the events. She'd book travel, send gear. And there was this one event that me and my original co-founder had been doing for 10 years. It was like so secondhand. We knew it like, the back of our hand. And because of that, we never really thought about it. It just came up. We did it every year and we didn't give much thought to it. So when we brought on this new event coordinator, that was not one of the areas we focused on. And so one day I get this frantic phone call. And it's from the organizers of this event. And I know them so well. I've been working with them for a decade. And she said, "Where's your crew?" And I was like, well, what are you talking about? And she said, well, there's no one here yet and we're starting soon. And now at these events, they rely on the camera for the judging systems, for the instant replay, for, feeding jumbotrons. It's not just for us selling copies or the live stream. They rely on this for putting on an event. She said, no one's here. And so I start calling around frantically. I call the event coordinator and she's like, no one told me about this event. No one trained me on this. And so it was a handful of other incidents that were like that just reinforced to me the importance of designating roles and responsibilities and having really clear training of who needs to do what. And so as that business became more successful, we were laser focused on SOPs and checklists and roles and responsibilities. And when I ultimately sold that business, I realized that this is something a lot of businesses struggle with. And so I started this consulting practice because I wanted to help other companies with their processes. And so it started with just friends of mine saying, hey, if you've got nothing to do, you could totally come to my office for a day a week. And, then it grew from there to, building operations manuals, training manuals for other people. And after several years of doing that, I thought maybe I could have some kind of proprietary system for doing this. And that's where the idea for Trainual was.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's really, really cool. You talk about building businesses and in your book, and you talk about, the need, we all talk about the need to work on the business, not in the business, which, I will tell any entrepreneur, like, you have to work in the business somewhere. You'll never get it off the ground. You have to work in it, but you can't stay in it if you want to scale. You can't do that. What advice would you have for entrepreneurs that are feeling stuck because they can't get out of the daily grind? They can't elevate themselves up.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's so frustrating when you hear work on, not in, and it's like, well, who's going to work in? This business doesn't run itself.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is you have to work in the business, but find leverage as soon as you can. And so you can get leverage in a few different ways. If there's demand for your time and your services, you can raise your price, right? Mm-hmm. And raising your price creates an increase in that top line revenue, an increase in your bottom line profit that gives you some decision-making ability to say, okay, do I want to just keep raising my profits and create this lifestyle business? Or do I want to reinvest those profits and introduce some costs into the business that will help expand the business? And that could be software, it could be employees. Only 1 in 3 companies ever go from being a non-employer business to an employer business. It's a huge leap to make. And so when you finally hire that next employee, now you've got someone else's plate you can start to fill up and you reallocate your time. So you're still working in the business, but you're working on something different in the business. And so that's what I think we're all trying to do is we are working in the business until we can work on the next floor of the business and then the next floor of the business and the next. And you realize that the on the business part is just the simple act of zooming out and understanding what you're building. But then you go back to working in the business in a particular role that's the best use of your time. And you create leverage and you hire other people. And now you work on something that's more elevated. And that's the journey that we're all going through.
That I've done 100 and some of these interviews. I've read, I don't know how many business books. I mean, hundreds. That is the best explanation of working on and in the business. I love how you're going to level up to the next floor of where you work in the business. And then you level up to the next floor, a higher floor where you're working in the business. And that makes so much more sense to me than I worked in the business until I could just work on the business, which I could just never tie, I couldn't tie that out. It didn't.
Right.
It didn't make sense. I love that. That was a great explanation. And by the way, if it's sounding like because I keep saying, Trainual, the best one, I believe in this product. So this is not a paid placement. This is not a paid placement for Trainual. We use it. We love it. My director just got back from his conference and is just over the moon with things that we can do to improve our business. So that's thus the enthusiasm. This segment is sponsored by Rockbox Fitness Franchising. Take control of your destiny and join the boutique fitness revolution with Rockbox Fitness. If you're ready to make a real impact in your community and own your own business that empowers people to achieve their best life, then Rockbox is the opportunity you've been looking for. They provide comprehensive support from site selection, upfit, training, and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with confidence and a strong recurring revenue member base. Visit rockboxfitness.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more about this exciting venture in the fast-growing boutique fitness industry. It's time to turn your passion for fitness and for business into a thriving venture. So you hired your brother, and as the CMO, I'd love to know what it's like, because I've talked with some guests on here about being in a family business, which is a very different dynamic
Yeah.
than having partners, or certainly just being the owner of the business, having all the equity. What is it like, and how have you done that well?
Well, I think a lot of family businesses start out of convenience where it's like, hey, we're both sitting around. Why don't we start this thing and we'll go 50-50 and you do this and I'll do that. And then they crumble because the actual day to day of the business does not depend 50% on you and 50% on your sibling or your brother or your partner or whatever it is. And so for me and my brother, we had worked together at a really young age. Like I
Mhm.
mentioned, he was the one I was paying $5 an hour to kind of show up. And as he got better and more skilled at what he did, he was working the audio, booth, and then he was working the camera, and then he was a production manager, and then he was running our LA office. And so he grew through my first
Yeah.
business as well. And so when it came time to start Trainual, he had built this storytelling ability. He was making documentary films. He was traveling around the
Mm.
world, climbing mountains and partnering with brands to tell cool stories. And so he was really good at this. And
Yeah.
I needed someone to help tell the story of why small businesses need to invest in their systems and processes, And so he
Yeah.
came on initially as a contractor with a really narrow role. He was going to help us launch our new website, our newsletter, our brand, and the drip email sequence when people signed up. And so his first couple months, he comes on, and we just had such a blast working together that it kept rolling forward 1 month at a time. And then he's learning how to do our Facebook ads, and then he's bringing on a camera operator of our own. And 6 months into the business, he said, "I think I just want to work in this
Yeah.
business. What does
Yeah.
that look like?" But the beauty of that was we got to define his role and say, okay, if I was going to go out and hire for this position that you're running, what does the equity look like? What does the salary look like? And let's create a role for you.
Mm.
And let's make sure that we've got an escape valve. So if you're no longer the fit to do that role in a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, we can still maintain a relationship. And so we've had a really healthy dynamic in building this business, but it was because we didn't just go, let's split it.
Sure.
It wasn't
Sure.
convenient. It was very intentional.
Yeah. Very intentional. Wow. I'm going to just run the tape back just a second, because I'm again, when I say I read hundreds of business books, it's like I'm a nerd about that. That's my leisure time, and I'm reading a book right now that Dan Martell just published called "SaaS as a Science,"
Yeah.
and you're featured in this book, which was funny because I just finished your book, and one of the things he's talking about, and when you're building a software as a service company, is figure out your funnel, of course, but then figure out your fastest, most aggressive customer acquisition strategy, and triple down, quadruple down on that before you go to another, another vertical to acquire customers. And if I'm correct, it was because you said Facebook ads and your brother, it was Meta where you had smashing success, and then you guys, you pressed the gas pedal on that one. Can you speak to that just briefly?
Yeah, so we were increasing our budget maybe 30% a week in
Oh,
in Meta and Facebook ads. And so let me go back first
yeah.
because I learned about, a funnel and the cost of acquisition and lifetime value even before SaaS. So when I was
Hmm.
consulting, I was working to get clients at first through word of mouth, which is how a lot of businesses operate. But
Yeah.
then I realized that you could not predictably get clients through word of mouth. You needed to get a little bit more sophisticated. And so at the time, I was putting out this newsletter and I published a really tiny book. It was called 100 Hacks to Improve Your Business, self-published it. And I put it out and realized if I found 100 prospects on LinkedIn and sent them a copy of this book, how many people would I have to send a copy to get an in-person coffee meeting?
Hmm.
And then how many in-person coffee meetings would it take to get one of my consulting projects, initial projects bought? And then how many of those initial projects did I have to do to turn into the retainer work? And so I had this funnel across my business to understand the cost of acquisition, the lifetime value of a customer, what they'd pay. And I could dial that up to just send more books out and create more business. And so in my consulting business, I went from me and one employee to 2 employees, 3 employees, 4 employees, I was building this consulting practice. And so that's what afforded us the luxury of being able to invest in creating a software business, which became Trainual.
Yeah.
So now in Trainual, when we went to launch it, we thought the same thing. How do we get this in front of more eyeballs? And at the time, Facebook was really, really underpriced attention. It was pretty cheap to do Facebook ads. And
Wait,
the
you're
thing
talking
that
about the late 2010s, probably?
yeah, this was like 2017 into 2018.
Yeah, that's some
And
golden years.
so, yeah. And so we saw that one thing we could do different was to just shoot iPhone videos that looked really organic and put them in people's feeds, and they would see it and think, is this a friend that I followed? Like, who is this? It didn't look like a polished professional ad.
Yep.
And so we hired a contractor to teach us how to do Facebook ads. And he gave us this piece of advice that if you can't dedicate $100 a day for the whole month to one ad, don't even do it. It's not even worth it. You won't get any sort of scalable results or data. And so it was a big ask for us to put $3,000 into a single ad that we didn't know if it was going to work. You know, a lot of businesses would look at that and say, I could hire a part-time person for that. I could do so many things with $3,000.
Yeah.
So we put it towards advertising. And we knew that we needed to get 5 or 6 customers in our first month and keep those customers for 6 months in order to pay back the acquisition costs that we'd invest in the ads.
Yeah.
And so it was knowing the math, knowing what we were looking for, and then doing one thing so there weren't all these other variables to know if it worked. And when it worked, when the few $1,000s in recurring revenue came through, it was okay, let's step on the gas. Let's do this again next month and 50% more. And the cool thing that happened in month 2 is we got the signups we expected to, but we also got these unexpected signups that saw our ad the previous month, but took longer to convert.
Yeah.
So it created this momentum and this snowball effect that started bringing in ads. And as we saw it working, we got more and more confident to ramp up the ads. And we did that with only a handful of ads and one platform on Facebook until we were a couple million in recurring revenue.
Yeah, that's outstanding. That's outstanding. And I have found that an entrepreneur, a business owner just really understands marketing, especially direct response marketing. When they don't ask, well, how much do I have to spend? They see it and they go, how fast can I spend this? Right? How fast? Because it's a 3 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1 return. I mean, you can't get it in the stock market. So how fast can you get the money into the platform to do that? Yeah.
It's exciting. Yeah. When you spend $1 and get 3 or 5 out, you're like, how can I get all of the dollars? Like, how big is this pool? And fortunately, the small business world is really big. So we were able to scale very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my very first Facebook ad campaign. When I launched it, I had a Zapier going to my phone to ding, when a lead came in,
cash register.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I had it in my pocket. I was at a holiday party, and man, the thing went on, like it started to catch about 8 p.m. and just kept dinging. And I looked at my business partner, I said, we're going to have a good month. We're going to have a good month.
I love it. We had hue lights that would turn green. It would blink, and so same thing. It was like this thing started blinking. It's just turned into a strobe light, like we're having a party, and that's when you know it's successful.
Yeah. It's going to be a good year. Good year. Something that I didn't expect, but you and your brother participate in Ironmans and marathons.
Yeah.
And one of those, am I correct, was in Antarctica?
Yeah.
Okay, you got to speak to that. Okay, I got to hear about that.
Yeah, so I'll go back again to the beginning of Trainual. Coming off 5 years of running a consulting business, I wasn't working out a lot. I was doing a lot of like wining and dining and taking people out and entertaining. And my brother was doing the opposite. Like I mentioned, he was mountaineering and going on these crazy adventures. And so he had gotten into the OCR, the like Spartan kind of competition. Mm-hmm. And when he came to Arizona, when we were starting up Trainual, he challenged me to do one of those races. And so for a couple months, I was, trying to get past the 1 mile that I could run without my back hurting and, trying to get on the trails. And when I did it, when I pushed over that hurdle, it was infectious. It was like, it was free time. It was time to think out in the open. It was time to listen to podcasts, and I just fell in love with it. And so from that small race, that 5K, it turned into a half marathon. And then Jonathan and I started talking, what would be a huge goal? And we found this Antarctica marathon. Neither of us had ever done a marathon, but we thought, okay, there's a 3-year wait list for this marathon. We might as well just put our names on it. It's like $100. And when that time comes, maybe we'll be ready.
Yeah.
And in the back of our head, we knew that it's getting closer. It's getting closer. COVID happened. It pushed it out to 5 years away. But we always knew it's getting closer. So we each trained and did our own marathons. We did the 70.3 Ironmans. We did, just big races and kind of built that endurance. And when our numbers got kind of pulled for the Antarctica thing, we were ready. And the business was ready, which was even cooler. The business was at a point where we could get away for a month and sail down to Antarctica and run this race, which was
you literally run it on the glaciers, so to speak.
Yeah, you're on. So it's ice and gravel, and where you run, it's kind of in between research bases, research stations. And so it was such a cool experience, though. And what most people don't know, you go down there, you don't even know what day the race is going to be, because you have to look for this weather window.
That's right.
Where it's not a blizzard. And so every day they're like, okay, maybe it'll be tomorrow, maybe not. You go to bed at night, they're like, yes, we're on. You wake up in the morning, no, we're off. And then, so you have very little preparation, and then you can't bring any wrappers or snacks onto the continent because they could blow away. And so you have to just unpack all of your snacks and put them in your pockets. And so you're eating crumbly Fig Newtons out of your pockets.
Little lint on there, not too bad. Yeah.
It's just such a cool experience, though.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. It's cool that you did that with your brother. It's really cool. This segment is sponsored by Beamlight Sauna Franchising. Are you looking to take control of your destiny and own your own business? Do you want a great brand in a rapidly growing market? Well, Beamlight Sauna is a nationwide health and wellness franchise with amazing opportunities in select markets. You can bring the power of infrared sauna and red light therapy to your community while you build a thriving business. Beamlight Sauna offers support that includes site selection, build out, even pre-launch programs and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with a large recurring revenue member base. To learn more about business ownership and franchise opportunities in the fast-growing health and wellness space, go to beamlightsauna.com. That's BEEM lightsauna.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more. In your book, The Business Playbook, there are a couple of things I just want you to speak to, because I loved the theme of it, and one was a little different. So the first is no forever policies. One of your sub chapters is no forever policies. Just touch on that if you could briefly.
Yeah. So policies are put in place for a reason, right? Like something happens in the business and you think, oh, I don't want that to happen anymore. So let me put a policy in place that stops that from happening. But then as the business grows and expands, people get more and more distant from the reason that policy was created in the first place. And so if you don't have a practice of revisiting your policies and eliminating them as you go, you end up with all this red tape. And that's what slows bigger companies down, is they've got these legacy policies that are left over from some reason why they existed in the past. That reason may no longer be accurate, but no one's asked the question of why does this exist? Yeah. And so I think every business should have a practice of revisiting their whole handbook, their whole policy section, and saying, does this still matter? Is this still serving a purpose? Is this slowing our people down more than it's enabling the culture that we want? And you should revisit them often.
I couldn't agree more. Another thing is you talk about your values, 6 values, and they're slightly different than the average value system that a company has. I'm a big believer in set your values. That's how you hire, fire, and just makes decisions easier. Like values make decisions easier. The consequences can be hard, but the decisions are easy. Yep. But your values for Trainual are a little different. And just if you could expand upon those.
Yeah, sure. So I think values are such an important part of business, because in the absence of specific directions, your policy or your your values are telling people kind of like directionally which way should I go? Am I culturally aligned? I'm probably going to make the right decisions, even if I don't have a specific SOP for this. And so, my values actually started within the consulting firm. And then when we shifted into Trainual, we modified them slightly to make sense with a growing software business. And so they're not just simple words, they're little phrases. And so the first one's make ideas happen. That's all about just execution and moving fast and testing things and not just letting good ideas sit on the shelf.
Sure.
Next one is everyone has a key. This one's about autonomy and ownership and people just coming and going and being results-based. The next one is no red tape. This one is, again, cutting through that bureaucracy and making sure that, everybody can suggest better ways to do it and that we're constantly improving. The fourth one is show up ready. So this is about being professional, being prepared, not wasting people's times in meetings, being efficient. After that is collect experiences. This one is about having a culture that's really well-rounded and understanding that we have lives outside of business, and the richer our life and experiences are, the easier it is to relate to people, coworkers, and customers. And then the last one is carry the groceries, which is a throwback to the only real payroll job I ever had, which was bagging groceries when I was 14 and starting up the video company. And this one is just about being helpful. It's like, I remember when I would walk a couple bags of groceries out to somebody's car for them and put them in the trunk. They never expected that. And they were just so thankful and grateful. And so it's about going out of your way and doing things for others.
Yeah. I really appreciate how each of your values, it almost tells a story. I mean, they're rich. They're just not words on a wall. Really rich.
Yeah. And we reinforce those. We have awards for each of the values. We do, so quarterly we give an award for each of them. And then we have an annual award for whoever kind of represents all of them. There's cash prizes for these things. We have emojis in Slack that we use that represent all of them. And so people are constantly using this. They're part of the vernacular of the company. And I think that's when they're working, when there's so many rich stories and examples behind each one. And it's not just, trustworthiness or something that is like so bland.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris just gave you a masterclass on how to create culture, figure out your values and then incentivize and reward people on that and champion that. That's how you create a culture. I had a few more questions. One though, I know you've even trademarked this, so I know you're way behind, or you're fully behind it. But I love the do it, document it, delegate it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the best advice you can give any small business owner in 6 words. In 6 words, that's outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, this is something, even when I was shaping the idea for Trainual, I was speaking and I would go out and I was teaching people this simple cycle that in a business, you start by doing something and you have to do it. And every time you do it, it's kind of an experiment. But when you realize that, hey, I'm doing this the same way every time, I'm doing it consistently, then that's your key to be able to unlock the next step, which is document it. Now that I've got something that works that people like, let me write down the recipe. And so documenting it is just describing exactly how you did it. And it could be rich media. It could film yourself doing this. You can write the instructions, record your screen. You're documenting exactly how you did it step by step. And then you can hand it to someone else and empower them to do it. And they've got the instructions, they've got the recipe, and they can go make whatever it is that you're doing and do it to your standard. And so if you follow that little framework, you can hand things off reliably. And then again, it frees you up to work on doing the next thing. And so as an entrepreneur, I think the most dangerous place to get stuck is when you are doing the same thing every day, because now you just have a job. And what we're supposed to do as entrepreneurs is identify, okay, I've solved this issue. I've perfected this thing. And now I can move on. And so this little framework is just a reminder to notice when you're doing things consistently and say, why am I still doing this?
Yeah. And Becca, the woman that I work with, she came back from your conference. And one just small tip she said is, she said, you know what I learned is we're using too many long form videos when a picture, a screen grab, even just a good old fashioned SOP would be just fine. Where we thought let's use video because it's more dynamic and whatnot. And you really shared that there's a time and a place for video, but not a 15-minute video. Nobody's watching that these days. So
Yeah, and the longer your videos are, the harder they are to update.
yeah,
And so if you make these long form videos, then they get stale. But if you
yeah,
make quick little tidbits or quick screenshots or something with an arrow, it's easy to go in and change it when the business changes.
yeah, yeah. Makes total sense. All right, last couple questions. Again, I've talked about being an avid reader. Certainly, your book's awesome. The Business Playbook: How to Document and Delegate What You Do So Your Company Can Grow Beyond You. Available on Amazon, and a great read. But you can't pick that one, right? That'd be cheating. What is another book that you've read that, knowing the audience is a lot of entrepreneurs or people that are really trying to improve their business or their health or their wealth? What's a great book? Doesn't matter when you read it, that when you set it down, Chris, you said, okay, that changes the way I think about this.
So going way back,
Yeah.
The E-Myth was the most powerful book I read. And Michael E. Gerber actually wrote the foreword for my book, which was such a cool full circle moment. But the E-Myth for me really opened that door of understanding how to manage the business and how to run the business and not just do the work in the business. More recently, you mentioned Dan Martell, but his book, Buy Back Your Time, I think is incredible for giving people a formula to understand what is an hour of their time worth and how can they deploy their dollars differently to free up some time. So I do this throughout my life. You might think it's crazy, but I pay people to even take my trash down the driveway and get
Yeah.
my mail and things like that, because the more automated my life is, the more I can focus all of my energy on what I'm good at. I have
Yep.
someone drive me to work because I can work in the back seat. And if I'm making money or doing higher level tasks in the back seat, why would I spend an hour driving? And so
Yeah.
I think there's things like that people could take from that book.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. A couple last questions. So this one's a little bit different, but you have lived this serial entrepreneur life. I've also done some cool experiential things, and Antarctica being one of those examples. When you fast forward to the end of your life, this long, rich life, but we're at the end and we're at your funeral, and a loved one is reading your eulogy. But if they're only allowed 3 words, it doesn't have to make a phrase or a sentence or anything, but just they're only allowed 3 words to describe your impact on them, your impact on the others that are attending, and just your impact on the world. What 3 words do you hope that person chooses to describe the life you lived?
Made us better. I'm trying to think like really simple. I
Yeah.
want to make an impact. Maybe the other direction I would go is he organizes chaos. Like
Yeah.
that's I think what one of my unique gifts is organizing chaos. That was the name of my consulting firm.
Yeah.
So whether it's a problem with a small business, a problem with a huge business, like government or anything, I feel like what the value I want to bring to the world is to see a mess and leave it better than I found it, to
Yeah.
help organize it and make things run more efficiently. And that's what I'm good at.
Love it. I was betting that you were going to say do, document, delegate, but you went a
That
different
one,
direction. I'm glad. I love it.
the trademark will make that one live on.
Exactly. And then last question before we find out how people can get a hold of you or follow you. If you had a magic wand, we're living in an interesting time right now in the world. We're recording this at the end of 2024 after the U.S. election. If you had a magic wand and you could wave that magic wand, Chris, and make one change to the world, one change the way people are, the way the world works, just the way our universe is. If I gave you that magic wand tonight and you waved it, when we woke up tomorrow, how would the world be different, according to Chris?
Where my mind goes first is I would want everyone to just assume good intent.
Mm.
I think there's so many conflicts right now across the world, and I think that if you go into any meeting thinking the person on the other side is a good person and trying to understand their belief system, I think the world would be a lot more friendly of a place, a lot more collaborative a place. And so I don't think I've said that anywhere before, but that's where
Yeah,
my mind went, is just
yeah,
assume good intent.
yeah. Somebody once told me you can't be curious and angry at the same time.
Oh,
It's
I love that.
impossible. Yeah, it's impossible to
That's
be
so
curious
good.
and angry. Yeah, that may have been Chris Voss, quite frankly. All right. So the most important question, Chris, how can people follow you, be a part of your journey, connect with you? Um, I'm sure after listening to this, and certainly my glowing reviews of your platform, I'm sure people would want to follow you. How do they do that?
Yeah. Well, thank you. First of
Yeah.
all, this was so fun.
Yeah.
People can get the book, The Business Playbook, or check out our product, Trainual.com. But if you want to follow me, there's two places I hang out. LinkedIn is where I post business insights. And so follow me on LinkedIn for, the musings of the day. And then follow me on Instagram. I post stories every day that are just kind of the behind the scenes of life, of running a company with 140 employees now,
Cool.
of, the workouts and the stuff leading up to these crazy races, of the meetings, the strategic planning, of the retreats I do with my wife. And so if you're interested in any of those things, at Chris Ronzio on Instagram and just Chris Ronzio on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. We'll actually put that in the show notes so that people are driving or whatever, they can find that at the end and connect directly with you. Awesome,
Perfect.
man. Thank you so much. I am grateful for you coming on today, and you over delivered. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for your support. And this was a lot of fun.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.